Good morning. Today we're going to take a look at piecewise functions. A piecewise function is just what the name says. Of course, it's a function, so it means it's going to pass the vertical line test. And then piecewise means it's going to be different sections, different pieces of functions that we put all together to make one complete function. So it's called a piecewise function. Once I get that piecewise function, I can graph it. I can look at the domain and range. I can evaluate with it. I can do all the other things I've been doing with the different functions we've been studying this semester, except for it'll be different sections of functions compiled together. So I want to first just quickly recap how to evaluate a regular function. So I have two functions down here. F of x equals 5 minus x squared, and g of x equals 4x squared plus 5x minus 1. So we're going to quickly recap how you substitute your numbers in and get your answer, and then we'll move on to piecewise function. So the first one says to find f of 3. So this means I'm going to take the number 3 and substitute it into my function. I know I'm using the f function because there's an f there. So there's an f here, so I'm going to be using this top function. So I'm going to be taking the number 3 and substituting it into my x. So that's going to give me 5 minus 3 squared. And we can use a calculator, Desmo, some sort of tool there to help us out. Once I make this substitution and type it in, you should get -4. Again, this is just recapping. B, find g of a half. This time it says g, so I'm going to be using this function right here because that's where g is right there. So I'm going to take 1/2, I'm going to substitute it in for this x and substitute it in for this x. So that's going to give me 4, plug in a half, squared, plus 5, plug in a half, minus 1. I can type all that in Desmos in one swoop, and you'll get 5/2. C wants me to do 4 times f of 2. So I need to first substitute 2 into the f function. So I'm going to substitute 2 in for x right here. And then I'm going to multiply that whole number by the number 4. So just for the time being, I'm going to ignore the number 4 and I'm just going to plug in 2. So when I plug in the number 2 in here, that's going to look like 5 minus 2 squared. And then I'm going to take that whole answer and I'm going to multiply it by 4. Use the calculator and you should get 4. D wants us to substitute -3 into our g function. Then once I get that number, subtract 5 from it. So take -3, plug it into g. So I'm going to be substituting it in right here. And then once I get that number, I'm going to subtract 5 from it. So first, let's do the g part. So that's going to be 4, plug in -3 squared, plus 5, plug in -3, and subtract 1 from it. So what I did was took -3 and I substituted it in for both of my x's. Now once I get this final answer here, I'm going to subtract 5 from it. So I've already typed that into Desmos and you should get 15. Now, I'm going to pause just for a minute here. Some of you guys know how to just type all of this into Desmos, and some of you guys do not. So I just want to pause just for a minute and go and open up a Desmos so you can see. So I've already typed in my f and my g. So f of x is 5 minus x squared, and g of x equals 4x squared plus 5x minus 1. Make sure you put your f and g in there. If you put your f and g in there, say I want to do a. So a told us to find f of 3. Then I could just type in f of 3. And notice I got -4 right here where my mouse is pointing, circling around. And I also got -4 when I did it algebraically, pencil and paper. The same thing is going to apply for the other ones. B wants me to do g of a half. So where I'm circling here on the left side of our screen. So if I type it into Desmos, and I just type in g of a half, notice it'll give me 2.5, which is the same as our answer, which is 5/2. So some of you guys know how to just type it in Desmos, which is fine. Others of us like to do it algebraically. Just make sure you're doing what you need to do to be successful. Now, with the numbers, this is going to work. So with the numbers, you can just type your numbers in. Voila, Desmos will give us the answer. If I go through and try C, just so you have one more example to look at, C says to do 4 times f of 2. I could type in 4 times f of 2. And we get the same answer, +4, that I got over here. Now, that is not going to work for E. So on the left-hand side over here, that is not going to work for E because I can't put the variables into my calculator. So I cannot type those into Desmos. So we're going to have to just make sure we know how to substitute into our problem. So if I pull this back up, make that bigger for us here, I'm still going to go through and do the same concept. So m of 1, I'm going to take m of 1 and substitute it into the f function. So my f function is 5 minus x squared. I'm going to take m plus 1 and plug it into x. So that's going to give me 5. And again, you maybe should probably do math in pencil. So this is going to be 5 minus m plus 1 squared. So I took m plus 1 and substituted it in for my x right there. From here, I'm just going to multiply this out. M plus 1 squared, you can do the box method or distributive property. That's going to give you m squared plus 2m plus 1. Again, box method or distributive property. And then once I combine my like terms and simplify, this negative needs to be distributed. So I'll have negative m squared minus 2m. And 5 minus 1 is 4. All right. So we're going to use this skill to help us evaluate a piecewise function. So we're still going to be substituting things into our function, except for our function is going to be comprised of different sections. So let's take a look at that. So evaluating the following piecewise function. So this is all one function. This is all together. One section of my function is x plus 4 when x is less than negative 2. And the other section of my function is negative x minus 3 when x is greater than or equal to negative 2. So this is one section, and then this is the second section. I'm first going to type this into Desmos so that you'll know how to graph it. And then I'll show you how to do it algebraically, and I'll show you just how to type it into Desmos so that you'll have both ways depending on which way you like to do it. So if I come over here to Desmos, okay, let me get rid of all of these other things that I have in here. All right, I'm going to type this piecewise function into Desmos, and it's all one function. So I'm going to start with my f of x, equal sign, and you want to hit the braces, the squiggly like parentheses type things, but they're called braces. When you're typing it in, you're going to type your restriction in first. So my restriction is the fact that x is less than negative 2. So if you look on the left-hand side where my pointer is, x is less than negative 2. So I'm going to type that in first. Then you're going to need to put a colon, so 2 dots. Then type in x plus 4, so x plus 4. So notice only the part of my graph where x is less than negative 2 popped up in the black color there. Now I need to do the bottom section of my piecewise function, so I'm going to put a comma. Again, you need to start with your restriction. The restriction lets you know what part of the graph that you're working with. So where my pointer is moving here, this time we're doing x is greater than or equal to negative 2. So I'm going to type that in. X is greater than or equal to negative 2. You're going to put your colon. Then we're going to type in negative x minus 3 because we only want the part of the function, only this section of the function. And let me get rid of this. So this is our piecewise function. Notice it looks a little different, but this is our piecewise function. I have this piece of the function, which is the x plus 4, but only the part that is less than negative 2. And then I have this piece of the function, negative x minus 3, but only the part that is greater than negative 2. So this is still a function. It passes the vertical line test. I will have an open circle here because it's less than, and then I will have a closed circle here. So it still passes the vertical line test. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through and do A, B, C, and D. I'm going to do those algebraically, and then I'll show you how you can use Desmos to get you to the answer once you type it in. So back over here, we want to evaluate this function when x is negative 3. So we want to find f of negative 3. This means to plug our x value in, which is negative 3, and see what we get back for y. Now we got to figure out, does negative 3 go in the top section or does negative 3 go in the bottom section? Now this is what I'm calling the restrictions, what I'm underlining here. You only use the top function if you have a number less than negative 2. You only use the bottom function if you have a number greater than or equal to -2. -3 is less than -2, so we're going to be using x plus 4. So x plus 4 is going to be the part of the function that we're using. So I'm going to substitute -3 in for x, just like we did before in the little recap section. So -3 plus 4. You can use Desmos or some sort of calculator, and my answer is 1. Okay, let's try another one. This time I'm doing f of -2. Again, figure out which section of your piecewise function that you're going to use. So -2 is not less than -2. -2 is equal to -2. So I'm going to be using this part of my function. So I'm going to be using this section. We're going to take -2, substitute it in for x right here, just like we did before. We use a calculator, some sort of device, and you should get -1. Okay, C, we're finding f of 3. So which part of my piecewise function does 3 go into? Does it go into the top or the bottom? It should go into the bottom piece because 3 is a number that is greater than or equal to -2. So we're going to be using this section of our piecewise function. I'm going to take 3 and make a substitution into our problem. And we'll use Desmos or a calculator, and you should get -6. And the last one, f of 4. We're going to take 4. We got to figure out, does it go into the top section or the bottom section? 4 is a number that is greater than or equal to -2. So again, we're going to be using the bottom section of our piecewise function. So I'm using the bottom section. We're going to take this 4 and make a substitution in for x right here. And type that in Desmos, and you should get -7. So piecewise function, let's pull up the graph again before we type it into Desmos. So this is our piecewise function here. I typed it in. When you're typing it in, just a recap, and we will do another one, you need to put your restriction first. So if it's greater than something or less than something, put your colon and then put the function that you're working with. So this is what our piecewise function looks like. So we took the different x values and we substituted them into the function. Now, the good thing for us, let me slide our answers over. See if I can zoom out a little bit here. Okay, there we go. So we can see everything all in the same picture there. So if I'm looking here, I'm going to show you how to get the answer in Desmos. So once you type in your piecewise function, if you notice for A, it says do f of -3. You can type in f of -3. And notice you got 1, just like we did over here when we did it algebraically. So if I try another one, it says do f of -2. So f -2, same thing. Notice I got -1 when we did it algebraically. And if you go through, you're going to get the same thing. We get -6 and we get -7. I only caution you, I don't mind you using Desmos at all. It's a wonderful, great tool. I only caution you that if it's asking us to do expressions like E up here where my mouse is pointing, hovering around, if you're doing expressions, you can't do those in Desmos. So you still want to make sure you understand the concept of taking something and making a substitution into the problem. All right, let's go through one more so I can make sure you know how to put it in Desmos. So I got one written right here. So we're going to go through and we'll do this one. All right, let's practice typing it into Desmos. When you type it into Desmos, you need to put the restriction part first. So we're going to have to type in x is less than or equal to 0, then the actual function piece. Then we'll have to type in x is greater than 2, and then the actual function piece. So let me get rid of this one and this one. All right, so I'm going to type in the first one there, f of x equal to, put your braces, which are the squiggly ones. They're right beside the letter P. So make sure you shift and then hit the braces. Type in your restriction first. So you need to type in x is less than or equal to 0. So x is less than, and I'm looking for, sorry, just a minute. Get down here to the bottom of my Desmos here. Okay, there we go. So x is greater than or equal to 0. X is greater than, sorry for the hold up there. Put your restriction there. Now type in the graph negative 2x plus 1. So that is the first piece of my piecewise function, and I typed in the wrong sign there. This is x is less than 0. There we go. So x is less than or equal to 0. I'm typing in this first part over here, and then I typed in negative 2x plus 1. Separate by the comma. Now type in x is greater than 2. So x greater than 2. Then you need to put a colon and type in your restriction that you're looking for, which is negative 1/2 x plus 3. All right, so recap, I had to get to the bottom of my screen there with everything that I had open, so sorry for the delay there. But recap there, we type in your restriction first. So I typed in f of x. We typed in x is less than or equal to 0. So that's the part over here on the left-hand side of my screen, separated by a colon, and then you type your function in. Then for the second part, we typed in x is greater than 2 because that was our restriction. And then we typed in negative 1/2 x plus 3. So now I can see that this is all of my piecewise function. So this whole graph right here is my piecewise function. You can find the domain and range just by looking. You can look at gaps and holes. You can see where it's increasing, decreasing, all that stuff once you graph it. Now let us solve it. So we'll do a couple of these algebraically, and then of course we can type it in Desmos. So this first one, f of negative 1, you got to see if it's going into the top section or if it's going into the bottom section. So the top section, you only use the top section if you have a number that's less than or equal to 0. You only use this bottom section if you have a number that's greater than 2. So if it's less than or equal to 0, use negative 2x plus 1. If your x is greater than 2, use negative 1/2 x plus 3. So we're going to substitute negative 1 into the top section. And I know that because negative 1 is a number that is less than 0. So we're using negative 2x plus 1. So we're going to plug it in. Negative 2, negative 1 plus 1. Type that into Desmos and you should get 3. Okay. F of 0. 0 is a number that's equal to 0. So it's not less than, but it's equal to 0. So we're going to be using the top section. So we're using negative 2x plus 1. We're going to substitute 0 in for our x. So that's going to give me negative 2. Plug in 0 plus 1. Type it in a calculator or mental math, and you should get 1. Okay. F of 2. Now, be careful. So I'm glad that hopefully you're still hanging in there with me with the video. When I plug 2 in, it's not going to go anywhere. 2 is not less than or equal to 0. And 2 is not greater than 2. 2 is equal to 2. So this does not plug into the top part or the bottom part. So this one is no solution. And last but not least, f of 4. Figure out if 4 is less than or equal to 0 or if 4 is greater than 2. 4 definitely is greater than 2, so I'm using the bottom section of my piecewise function. So we're using negative 1/2 x plus 3. Take your number, take this 4 and substitute it in for x. So negative 1/2, plug in 4 plus 3. Use Desmos or some sort of calculator and we get 1. And of course, once you have graphed it in Desmos, you are able to just use your calculator to help you with that, which I don't mind. So once you have typed it in, you are able to just use Desmos. So I was trying to get them all in one place. There we go. So we can see everything all at once. So I've already typed the function in. Again, type your restriction in first, followed by a colon, and then the actual function piece. So now I can type in letter A says do f of negative 1. Notice we got 3, the same thing we did when we did it algebraically. B says to find f of 0. So there we have it, f of 0 is 1. I want to show you what happens if you try to find f of 2. Okay, it's going to give you undefined. So that's how you know that there's no solution. So now you know a little bit about piecewise functions, and we're actually going to be doing some more of these tomorrow.